My dad chose my abusive ex over me even after everything. I told him, I can't have a relationship with you until you cut ties. He said, you need to forgive and forget. But when I refused, secrets were exposed, family betrayals came to light, and I finally realized. This is a complicated and lengthy situation, so please bear with me. My ex-husband, let's call him Chad, was emotionally and sometimes physically abusive. We share 2 children, and co-parenting with him has been a nightmare, even after I remarried and had another child. He's manipulative, controlling, and just an overall toxic person. My dad owns multiple rental properties, some of which he purchased while I was still married to Chad and others after our divorce. He has always viewed these properties as family investments and part of his plan for generational wealth. He often spoke about passing them down to his 3 children. However, my biggest issue is that my dad currently co-owns 6 of these properties with Chad, each with a 50-50 stake. This makes me incredibly uncomfortable. The core problem is that while my dad wants to have a relationship with me now, he refuses to acknowledge the abuse I suffered at Chad's hands. Despite knowing at least some of what I went through, he refuses to cut ties with Chad. This has left both me and my current husband feeling deeply betrayed and unsettled. Frankly, it's confusing and painful. The worst part? Chad is making my dad money that my dad now depends on to live. So much for generational wealth. Meanwhile, I have no financial ties to my dad, I neither give him money nor take any from him. Chad, however, only works with my dad because my dad has the funds to invest in these real estate deals. Chad, being a contractor, handles the renovations, and they split the profits evenly. In reality, my dad takes all the financial risk by fronting the money but doesn't even get his full investment back, while Chad keeps getting richer. To make matters worse, Chad doesn't pay a cent in child support from this income. Since everything is under my dad's name, none of it was counted as Chad's income during our divorce, allowing him to avoid financial responsibility for our children. The whole situation is beyond frustrating and feels completely unfair. To make matters worse, during my very difficult and abusive divorce, my dad, knowing some of the things Chad did, actually told me he was praying for me and Chad to reconcile. This is the kind of man my dad is, more concerned with appearances and what certain circles of his Christian community think than with the actual reality of the situation and the well-being of his own daughter. And it gets worse. It's not just a business relationship. My dad and Chad actually socialize. They hang out. Church, lunches, dinners, birthday parties, the whole 9 yards. My dad's excuse? They never talk about me. Which, frankly, I find incredibly hard to believe. Even if they aren't actively gossiping about me, the very fact that my dad chooses to spend time with my abuser, to share meals and celebrate milestones with him, speaks volumes. It sends a clear message that his comfort and his financial interests are more important than my well-being and my peace of mind. It feels like he's choosing Chad over me, over and over again. I've tried to have conversations with him about this. I've tried to explain how his continued relationship with Chad and his refusal to acknowledge the abuse is hurting me. I've explained how it makes me feel unsafe and unsupported. But he just brushes it off, saying things like, you need to forgive and forget, or, I don't want to get involved. So, here's where I might be the I've set a boundary. I've told my dad that I cannot have a relationship with him until I made it clear to my dad that he needs to completely cut business ties with Chad and ensure that Chad no longer has any financial stake in any of the properties. I also told him that he must acknowledge the abuse I endured instead of downplaying it or pressuring me to reconcile with my abuser, even after everything that has happened. Until these issues are addressed, I want nothing to do with his will. I refuse to let any potential inheritance become a means for Chad to reach out to me or attempt to manipulate me in the future. Am I being unreasonable? Am I wrong for setting these boundaries? I feel like I have no other choice. I need to protect myself, my husband, and my children from Chad's influence. But at the same time, I feel deeply sad and conflicted. I love my dad, but I can't keep tolerating this. It feels like I'm being treated as if I were just a former in-law, rather than his daughter. Reddit, am I wrong for prioritizing my safety? TLDR, my dad refuses to cut ties with my abusive ex-husband or acknowledge the abuse I suffered. I told him I can't have a relationship with him unless he removes Chad from any property ownership and recognizes what I went through. Ida? Relevant comments. Commenter 1, NTA. Just curious, how do your siblings and other family members feel about your dad's continued involvement with Chad? Are they supporting you in any way? OOP, it's a long and complicated situation, but not really. My sister is actually friends with Chad. My brother can't stand him, but we don't really talk because his wife and I don't get along, partly due to my divorce, and that drama is tangled up with my current husband Thomas's divorce, too. The betrayal of a parent hurts the most. OP, thank you. I used to be a total daddy's girl before all of this happened. One night before our divorce, Chad and I were arguing, and he clenched his fist and lunged at me. At the last second, he punched the wall next to my head instead of hitting me, because he knew that leaving a mark on me would have serious consequences. I was texting my dad throughout the entire ordeal. He didn't do anything. He didn't come over, didn't call Chad, nothing. His excuse? That I told him not to intervene. But at that moment, I was in a trauma response, more worried about not setting Chad off again than my own safety. Trauma lies to you like that. The next day, Chad took my dad out for breakfast, told him his version of events, and asked for forgiveness. My dad gave it to him, without ever asking for my side of the story or even checking in on me and the kids. And to make things even worse, the fight Chad and I had that night? It was about my brother. Chad didn't want him coming over to our house anymore because they absolutely despised each other. So, in the end, my dad chose Chad over both his own daughter and his own son. To this day, I don't know exactly what Chad said to my dad at that breakfast. But I do know my dad is fully aware of my side of the story because I've told him. And he still shows no remorse. Commenter 2, NTA. Protect your peace. But honestly, don't be afraid to take action. Reporting their business could spark an investigation. OOP, it's obvious to everyone except my dad, unfortunately. Ironically, I now run a non-profit, which is kind of funny considering that during my divorce, my dad told my mom and me that he wasn't running a charity when she suggested he let me and my kids stay in one of his rental houses that needed work. I was even willing to help renovate it, given my design background. I'm a personal trainer and nutrition coach, and I was frustrated that the people who needed my services the most couldn't afford the ridiculous prices my gym charged, $65 to $110 per hour. So, I launched my nonprofit online, where I provide 3 weekly workouts, unlimited nutrition coaching, and a book club-style life coaching program at a much lower cost. I focus on helping people who genuinely need it but can't afford typical industry prices. We have several other projects in the works, more info at ltwcdc.org. My dad's treatment of me, my trauma therapist helping me process everything, and my mentor encouraging me all played a role in making this happen. Now, I'm focusing on building my best life and expanding my nonprofit to help as many people as possible. My life motto is, be who you needed when you were younger. I want to be the person I wish I had during the hardest parts of my life. It sucks that my dad is choosing to stay out of it, but that's his choice. I told him what I need from him, and he hasn't made any effort to meet me halfway. That's on him. I'm not angry anymore. I've forgiven everyone, but I've also set firm boundaries. On child support and legal battles. Chad and I share custody 50-50, at least on paper. In reality, he often asks me to take the kids, so the split isn't actually even. My dad doesn't consider child support to be real, providing, he sees it as a handout. In his eyes, as long as Chad buys things for the kids when they're with him, that's enough. Going back to court would be a disaster, Chad constantly threatens it. If we did, everyone would be subpoenaed, and it would likely destroy what's left of my extended family. I won't start that fight unless Chad forces my hand. On Chad's income and financial manipulation. A lot of people have pointed out that Chad should be paying more child support. Just to clarify, he does pay, but he's frequently late. The issue is, Chad owns his own business, and if you've ever been self-employed, you know how easy it is to manipulate reported income. During our divorce, I could only prove that he made around $80,000 per year. He tried to claim it was $50,000. In reality, he makes a lot more than that, but since he pays his personal bills through his company, the money never enters his personal account and therefore doesn't count as income on paper. At the time of our divorce, he was covering our $1,200 mortgage and putting the same amount into a TDA account every single week. My lawyer knew he was making way more than $80,000, but proving it would have taken years of legal battles. Even our mediator said his company's financial records were a mess. I chose not to fight it in court because I just wanted to be done. I took a lump sum payment instead of alimony, secured child support, and walked away. After over a decade of emotional and verbal abuse, I was a shell of who I used to be. I wanted my kids to see a different way of living, even if it was only half the time. And it's already making an impact. Thankfully, our custody agreement has a legally binding parenting plan that protects me from Chad's gaslighting. There's even a clause that states that if we can't reach a decision, the final say falls to me until mediation is scheduled. Chad knows I'm aware of his shady business practices, and he avoids mediation because he doesn't want that exposure. I can't afford to take him on legally right now, but if he ever forces me into court, I will figure it out. I've thought about reporting him to the IRS, but I'm keeping that in my back pocket in case he takes me to court. If it comes to that, I'll have his entire business and financial history audited. Since he works with my dad on a handshake agreement, no contracts, no EIN, no trust accounts, my dad would also be forced to open up his books during discovery. And unlike Chad, I have an EIN and trust account. It would be much harder for him to dig into my finances. Update. Wow, I really appreciate all the support from everyone. Turns out you were all right. This will be my final update since I need to move on with my life. Over the past few weeks, my mom's oldest sister passed away. She had been ill for a while, so it wasn't unexpected, but still sad. Out of politeness, I called my mom to offer my condolences, even though I wasn't particularly close to that aunt. I also made it clear that I wouldn't bring up any of our ongoing issues unless she did. As expected, she used her sister's passing as an opportunity to guilt-trip me, saying something along the lines of, "In 10 years, this could be me, and I don't want our family to be estranged like this." I reiterated my boundary: if they stop maintaining such a close relationship with my ex and show me some loyalty, then we can work on fixing things. Her response? She won't cut ties with him because he's the only way she gets to see her grandkids. I reminded her that this is a recent development and that she never set boundaries with him in the past. In the same conversation, she admitted to visiting his house around Christmas and mentioned that he regularly attends my niece's birthday parties. Then, she hit me with another complaint. She's upset that I got together with my now husband and had my youngest child without seeking her help. I was 34 at the time, married to the most supportive and loving man I've ever known, yet she's mad that I handled my own life without running to her for guidance. I still can't wrap my head around that one. Meanwhile, my dad has done nothing to distance himself from my ex in their business dealings. He insists it's for generational wealth, though I don't think he fully understands what that term means. As for my sister, she bombarded me with messages, ultimately admitting she bears no responsibility for anything. This is the same sister who comforted my ex-husband and even asked me at Thanksgiving if I felt sorry for him, despite knowing all the harm he caused me and my kids: verbal abuse, toxic masculinity, gaslighting, name-calling, financial manipulation, etc. She even had the nerve to say my healing and growth is selfish because I'm not including her in it. I wish I were making this up. The only productive conversation I had was with my younger brother. Even so, he still has reservations about my husband, which is odd considering how similar they are. He originally told me not to date at all, but I followed my own path, found happiness, and now he seems bitter about it. I was 34, he was 28, what was the issue? Honestly, I don't know if my family is upset that I ignored their advice or if they're frustrated that my life turned out well despite doing things my way. I wish I had a better explanation, but I don't. I have no idea how things will unfold, but I'm standing firm on my boundaries and focusing on the exciting goals my husband and I have for our nonprofit, which supports people in life transitions who lack a support system. Turning lemons into lemonade. Thanks again for the support. I know this update is a bit vague, but the full story would take forever to explain. It's complicated and exhausting, mostly due to my family's toxic mindset. I haven't blocked anyone because, as much as they frustrate me, I just can't bring myself to do that. Instead, I moved an hour away and only respond when I feel like it. My priority is my own family and, big news, our new baby. I just found out I'm 5 weeks pregnant. It's sad that my parents and siblings are missing out on a relationship with my youngest children because they refuse to accept that I left behind the life they wanted for me. But I know I'm breaking generational cycles, and that often means becoming the villain in their story, a title I'm more than willing to embrace. Relevant comments. Commenter: OOP's father has a CPA, so he should realize how much he's actually losing in the process. OOP, he does have a CPA, it's his brother-in-law. When I brought up my nonprofit and explained how trust accounts work, my dad's immediate reaction was, "That sounds illegal." All I had said was that I was placing my business into a trust for protection and paying myself through it. That response makes me question how competent my uncle is as a CPA, but who knows? For the record, my uncle isn't my CPA. Commenter 1, honestly, your family sounds like a cult. They're just upset that you broke free from their control. It's time to go completely no contact and find a solid family lawyer in your area to file for child support, especially since you have proof of fraud. OOP, I've actually said before that it feels like I escaped a cult or even Scientology. My mom and sister keep tabs on me through social media, since I use it to promote my businesses, and then they run off to gossip about it with my brother. Commenter, how many kids do you have? OOP, I have 5, 4 biological and 1 stepchild. Update. OMG, I just had a major realization in therapy, and I know y'all will appreciate this. By the way, Charlotte, I'm Southern, and I love when you use your Southern accent. If you ever read these posts, please use it. Back when I was going through my divorce, my brother and his wife were renting a house from my dad. One day, while visiting them, we used to be really close, I noticed the house next door was preparing for an estate sale. Since my dad has always been interested in buying properties in that neighborhood, I went over to check it out. He's been in the rental business my entire life, so I've gotten pretty good at assessing a home's potential. I mentioned the house to both my mom and dad, suggesting he buy it and let me and my kids live there while I helped fix it up. The place only needed a fresh coat of paint and a few modern updates in the kitchen. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home with the exact same layout as my brother's house. This plan would have allowed me to move out of my parents' place, where I was living at the time, which would have relieved a lot of tension for everyone. My mom seemed open to the idea, but my dad rolled his eyes and said, "I'm not running a charity." Naturally, I broke down in tears. He later apologized and gave some excuse, but I honestly don't even remember it because it was total nonsense. Well, here's the kicker. While processing all of this in therapy, I suddenly realized that my idea was the exact same business model my ex pitched to my dad. My dad provides the funds, my ex does the renovations, and they split the profits 50-50ths. The only difference? I wasn't even asking for a share of the profits, I just wanted a stable home for my kids while I helped fix up the house. Looking back, I see what a massive opportunity my dad completely ignored. He could have helped me establish my own real estate business and given me the same guidance he gave my ex. Instead, he let me struggle when he had the power to set me and my kids up for a better future. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I saw my dad in a totally different light. I honestly don't think he even realizes how hypocritical he is. It's clear now, he didn't want me to be independent. He wanted my life to be as difficult as possible so that I'd go crawling back to my ex, lifting whatever shame my divorce had supposedly brought to the family. But I would have walked through fire before doing that. So yeah, this is what my dad calls generational wealth. He brags about doing business with my ex for the sake of his grandkids, yet when given the chance to actually help their mother, his own daughter, suddenly, it's a charity case. Make it make sense. Relevant comments. Clarification on OOP's father and ex's business agreement. Boop. They primarily rent out the properties but sell the ones they either can't or don't want to keep. My dad doesn't currently live in any of them, though he did in the past, a long time ago. There's no formal business structure, no LLC, no contracts, just a handshake deal. My ex is a home remodeler, a step below a licensed contractor because he hasn't taken the test yet. He got into remodeling during our marriage, and I was there for every single step, every flip, every renovation. On top of that, I was raised by my dad to do the exact same work since he's been in this business my entire life. So, I'm extremely familiar with home remodeling, house flipping, and rental management. I get that from a business perspective, families aren't usually seen as investments, but I've come to realize that's exactly how my dad views things. When he told me he was the only one helping me, I took that at face value. So when I pitched an idea that aligned perfectly with what he was already doing, I thought it made sense. He's my father. Buying a house, which he eventually did, and guiding me through the same process he walked my ex through wouldn't have been difficult. In fact, it would have been an easy way for him to make money and help his daughter rebuild her life. I'm not saying he owed me anything, but as a parent myself, I can't imagine claiming to be my child's biggest supporter while refusing to help them in a situation that was mutually beneficial. Also, my ex and I flipped our first home together, and I designed everything. When we sold it, we made at least $40,000, probably closer to $50,000, which we used as a down payment on our next house, which also sold for a major profit. How did Chad convince OOP's father to do business? Boop. You're right, I don't actually know how my ex pitched the idea to my dad. I even asked my dad directly, how did Chad convince you to go into this deal with him? Because he's benefiting a lot more than you are. I wanted to learn how to negotiate at that level. But my dad didn't have a good answer, because, truthfully, the deal isn't even that great for him. When I approached my dad, my pitch was simple. He buys the house in his name only. My 2 kids and I live there while I work to renovate it. I'd handle everything except electrical and plumbing, which he and my ex always hired out for liability reasons. For context, I'm not just someone who wants to flip houses, I know how to do the work. I hustle. I've installed hardwood floors, baseboards, tiles, backsplashes. I've painted professionally, not just for myself, but for friends, churches, and other organizations. I've installed insulation, replaced doorknobs, cabinet poles, faucets, and even fixed a broken toilet. So when I say I've been paying attention, I mean it. The only thing I don't have is a certification behind my name. At the time, I was working as a certified personal trainer, but like most gyms, they weren't paying enough. My lawyer suggested I get any job to show I was employable. Meanwhile, I also have a BA in professional studies with a minor in marketing, which is now my full-time career alongside running my nonprofit. The irony? I am the daughter my father raised. If he had taken my offer, his rental business would be a fully functioning C Corp right now, and instead of owning 50% of 6 properties, he'd own a lot more. I know this because I know me. He doesn't. For context, my degree included fashion merchandising, home furnishings, economics, and accounting, all of which set me up for retail entrepreneurship. For my senior thesis, I had to create a fully detailed business plan and present it to my professor as if they were a bank approving a loan. Is OOP the scapegoat of her family? Boop. According to my therapist, yes.